Chapter 2 of your guidebook on how to survive missions starts now. We go all out and out there for our next interview. 1,979 miles away from TS Films HQ to El Salvador. Wait, we're not done yet! We go to Honduras, over 100 miles out, but wait, that's not where we're interviewing this person. We're going to North Aurora, Illinois, which is 1,916 miles from Honduras, and that's where we bring in our second person we're talking to, and that is Rachel Johnson. Rachel, it's a pleasure to have you on. I'll be honest, the last person we had just last week, Dave Garda, he's with Sos Ministries. According to him, he's known me even before I was born. If I am correct, I think that's the same with you and your family, right?
Yes, I believe that is correct.
How have you known my parents then, all these years?
Well, I know that my parents knew your parents before they were even married. Let's see, what's the date of your parents' anniversary?
I don't know that, to be quite honest. I was going quite closer if it was closer to my birthday, but I know they've been married for quite a while before 1987, which was the year of my birth.
My parents got married on June 6th. Excuse me, June 5th. And I think they traveled to your parents' wedding the week after they got married. And they were in each other's wedding.
I was about to say, I remember they were pretty close, and, you know, I mean, even with the distance, we still find ways to meet. Mm-hmm. Which is always the pleasure. And you didn't exactly go to the cities, you went to villages, am I right?
We went to both, but yes, we went to a couple of the cities to do some work somewhat in orphanages and to appeal for the orphans, but then a lot of the work day to day was just in the villages, yes.
So, so when was this, and who did you go with?
My first trip was December 2011. I went for 2 weeks. And then my second trip was July 5th through August 1st, 2012. And the third trip I went December this past year, 2012 as well, for 2 weeks. And I've been going with Sos Ministries. And they were a ministry started in Florida. SOS stands for Seekers of Souls.
Yeah, I was about to say SOS. That sounds like that's a ministry that's in deep need of help as occasion to reaching out to people who need help. That sounds like an oxymoron. Let's start with trip number 1. Where do you go, and opine everything that you did?
Oh wow. Okay. It was such an incredible opportunity to go there, and I feel like we're so blessed by what we have here, and so often we take it for granted, what we are given here, the wealth that we have, and there they have so little, and yet those who know Christ are so incredibly joyful and trusting him for his provision, and they love him with all their heart, and you just see the passion that they have for Christ and for his work. And I feel like the wealth that we have here in the States has taken away from a lot of the focus that we could be having on Christ. I think it distracts us from that. And they have so little, and yet they have so much because of what Christ has done for them. And that was challenging to me.
You had a longer stint, your second trip.
Yes.
what was unique about that one compared to the first one?
I had a little bit more responsibility. I ended up becoming kind of the team nurse. I'm not a nurse in any way, shape, or form, but I just was able to help keep track of all the medicines and stuff. So that was unusual as far as what I did.
Right. Well, do you have prior experience to being a nurse before your trip, that particular time?
No.
Wow.
And it was just for our team, for any sickness, anyone who was struggling with anything, that they were just supposed to come to me. But
so if someone had strep, they'd instantly go to you.
What?
So if someone had strep, they'd instantly go to you.
Well, there were doctors around that if someone had something more serious, they could go to. But for just different things related to eating or drinking things you shouldn't, they would often come to me. But the aside from what my responsibilities looked like, the July trips are very, very similar, but there are a lot of differences as well. We traveled a couple times back and forth between Honduras and El Salvador, and we helped to put on children's youth conferences where they would have the youth actually stay overnight at the church in El Salvador. And so they would have a whole day and a half of stuff for the youth with different sermons, testimonies, game times, food, lots of interaction with the youth, breakout sessions, really helping to influence them for Christ. Because if you can get into the heart of the youth, then it's just so powerful in the community there, and get a hold of them before the gangs would. We did a lot of ministry in the orphanages. Some of us only went a couple times, just because there are several different groups that come out through the entire month. That I think I went to the orphanages. One orphanage I went at the beginning and at the end, and then another one I went to, I think, for one day at the beginning. There are two different orphanages that we've gone to. So one really, really special story was about this boy named Edwin. I could share about it if you want me to.
Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay. Edwin was a very troubled youth. He had run away and run many miles. He was, psychologically, he had a lot of issues. And when we were going to talk to the director of the children about going to the orphanage, she told us about Edwin, and she said that Edwin was the worst case they had ever had, and that there was no hope for him. And when we heard about him, what we heard sounded very similar to like the demon-possessed man in the Bible. And you just wonder how much of it is really psychological issues, or if he really is, if he really was struggling with demon possession. And he would get angry and beat himself, and they had to keep him in a room with bars and stuff. And so we went to the orphanage the first day, and we were a little bit just cautious as we went there, but showing love and compassion. And we walked in, and the guy who's in charge, Mike, he said in Spanish, he said, "My friend Edwin." And Edwin just went right up to him and gave him a big hug, and he was just laid his head on Mike's shoulder, and you could tell he was just starved for love and compassion. But it was during our time there, we spent time just loving on the kids. We only were able to interact with about 5 kids that time, because the Catholic leaders of the orphanage don't like our group because we're sharing Christ with them. And they gave us 5 children. 4 of them were HIV positive, and then Edwin, who is the other troubled one, we got him. And so we had a couple hours just to talk with him and to talk with each of them. And we broke out into little groups and shared the gospel with each of them. And just really ministered to them. And Mike and another guy named Oliver shared the gospel with Edwin, and they just ministered to him through scripture. And they said they would share some verses with him, and Edwin would just cry and cry and cry. And then he would look up and ask for more, and then he would cry again and just sob. And they finished sharing, and Edwin said he wanted to ask Christ into his life, to ask him to save him from his sins. And it was, he came to know Christ as a savior, and he just seemed so excited and so joyful. And he asked if he could keep the Bible that they had used to share the gospel with him. And Edwin couldn't read. He was completely illiterate, but he knew that it brought such peace and comfort to him that he wanted to be able to keep it and sleep with it at night and stuff. And so they said he could. And we had the youth conference coming up that weekend, so we were hoping to have him come join us for the youth conference and get special written permission that he could be released and stuff. And the weekend of the youth conference, we found out that the nuns had taken his Bible away from him and thrown it out. And he became angry because of that, and I think he knocked his fist through a window, and they ended up sending him to a mental hospital because of it. And we were just so devastated to hear that. And during that time, though, we also found out that the workers at the orphanage are from the workers, because there are the workers and then there are the nuns, and the workers like us and they're helpful. And the workers said after Edwin had come to know Christ, he was asking others there, "Do you know Jesus? Do you know Jesus?" And after he lost his Bible, the workers went and they retrieved the Bible for him, and they kept it with them, so that way when he came back, they would have that on hand. So throughout the month that we were there, we kept trying to get in contact with him when we were in El Salvador, hoping that we could go see him maybe at the hospital and minister to him more. And we weren't able to get permission, and Satan really was putting roadblocks in the way, trying to keep us away. And toward the end of the month, a couple days before we were to leave, we had some free time, and just kind of, we could choose to do whatever we wanted. And a couple of the people wanted to go back to the orphanage one last time. And so we went back to the orphanage. And prior to that, I had asked Mike if there was any chance we might see Edwin, that we could go to the hospital and see him. And he said no, that there was no way they'd let us. And so that was really sad. And the last day almost the last day of the trip, we were getting ready to go, and I didn't feel well. I was sad. I was just really struggling with, I think, leaving and just discouragement over what had happened with Edwin maybe, and having to say goodbye to everyone. And I felt like just staying back. I didn't want to go, but I also knew that it would be one of the last chances I could spend time with the team and see the orphans. And so I decided to go, and we arrived at the orphanage, and at first I thought there were no kids there at all. I looked across the yard and I didn't see anybody. And then as we pulled up, somebody said, "He's here." And Edwin was across the yard over by a couple of the workers there. And he was sitting there, and he hopped up and ran over to us, and we greeted him, and we were so excited to see him. And he just seemed to be doing so well. And God gave us that time. We were able to spend some time talking with him and showing him pictures just from the last few weeks. And he had been asking about us, "When are you coming back? When are they coming back?" And they hadn't heard from us at all, so that he didn't know. And they had tried to call us that morning to tell us he was back, but they thought it was a wrong number. They weren't able to communicate that. And we got to just spend time enjoying each other's company, and then we opened God's Word again and just spoke truth to him and encouraged him. And I shared Romans 8:28 with him, that all things work together for good to those that love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. And I said, Edwin, your life here may not be ideal. There may be some really hard times you go through, but God says that all things work together for good to those who love him. And I said, the trials in our life, God can use those to mold us and shape us into who he wants us to be. And I said, I know that even when I go through hard times, that God is using those in the future, or will use them now, to strengthen my relationship with him and to help me to grow. So, such an incredible time. And my whole day went from one of sadness and discouragement in the morning to just complete joy to see what God had done. And I was just to see that Edwin had changed so much from, he was no longer struggling mentally with the psychological issues that he had. I think he had been peaceful. And so that's my favorite story probably so far, of just something that God has done from the July trip, at least.
Actually, I may have to say it might be the coolest orphanage story I've ever heard in my life. And that goes to show you, as a friend of mine who once went to an orphanage in China, and I don't think she has anything that cool to share. Your move, Cassie. Anyway, I'll be honest, that is a very cool experience of what you've been through. Probably some people are envious of what you've been able to accomplish, or I guess you could argue what God has done through your willingness to go and serve.
And that's really what it is, because last December I was just so humbled and challenged by the fact that God can use us who are sinners, who just of ourselves, we have no desire for God. The only desire that we have for God is something that he has put in us because he first loved us. Mm-hmm. And the fact that God can use us to be able to bring glory to his name is just absolutely humbling and incredible. So I was very, very challenged by that last December 2011, and every time I go there, just amazing to see what God can do through sinners who have repented and have come to him and are seeking to serve him with their lives. Because honestly, God could do all of this without our help. He could share the gospel however he wanted to, by an angel appearing to somebody, or whatever means he wanted to do, and yet he chooses to use us and bring glory to himself through us.
Rachel Johnson, thanks for coming on, and good luck with everything that you do in the future. And I hope to meet with you sometime in the future. You're more than welcome to come by again here in TCS Films HQ in Hickman.
Thank you.
No problem. And be sure to tune in next time. We'll have a person who served with Campus Crusade for Christ doing work in Alaska, which should be interesting. And you'll see that on the flip side. You said Rachel, you had bus troubles on your first trip, right?
Yes.
That reminds me of a story my friend Will had. He had, basically, he was coming back from a mission trip in...
It's incredible being up there in the creation, and it's just, you have mountains and you have ocean and you have beaches, and it's just so amazing. But sometimes when people don't know their creator, it's hard for them to even see what's all around them.